for women of color. It is my pleasure and honor to be back on this campus speaking to this conference. 15 years ago, if there was a conference of this nature at the University of Richmond, I would have been sitting alongside of you in the audience. Students, and I know that there are some other faculty and staff, but right now my comments are for students. Though things may be difficult at times, never forget that you are privileged to be here. Now, before we get started, I'm going to have you all take out a little sheet of paper and ask you if you would write down your greatest challenge. Please don't share it with anyone. Just jot it down quickly. I'll give you about 10 more seconds. And I also wanted to preface my remarks by saying that I understand that everyone has different beliefs. And what I'm sharing, or what I'm going to share today about how I dealt with my greatest challenge was with my belief system. So it was just intended to share, and perhaps if some of the things that help me are able to help you, then that's a great thing. Now, I imagine that I was invited in part because of my story and my connection to the university. Mine is a story that may seem unique because it involved my postmenopausal 55-year-old mother carrying and delivering my triplets. But at the core, the themes are universal. The central messages that I would like for you to take away from my speech today are, number one, faith is not a dirty word, but must be practiced, even when things seem hopeless. Number two, never give up the hope and dream of a better tomorrow, and never stop working to make that dream a reality. Number three, you cannot control everything. And four, real love knows no boundaries and conquers all. Now, I would be remiss if I did not use this platform to do 2 minutes of advocacy and encourage you as women who are empowered and educated and capable of making good decisions about your reproductive and sexual health to be informed about your reproductive choices. The issue of infertility is one of those dirty little secrets that most people don't know about unless they are personally affected by it. It may seem that infertility affects a relative small number of people, and for anyone who's not aware, infertility is just having a difficult time getting pregnant and bearing children. So you may think, well, it's just something that affects a few people, but almost 10% of the U.S. population struggles with infertility. That's 25 million people. That's 2.6 million couples. It is not a disease that discriminatively affects one group of people. In fact, we find it amongst the wealthy and the poor, people of every race, ethnicity, socio-demographic background. Simply put, it affects everyone. It is not likely to be a disease that people share because often people affected choose to privately struggle. They suffer silently, shrouded by a sense of hopelessness, anger, and despair. When asked why it happens, the reasons are many, be it congenital abnormality, something that people were born with, or some form of trauma that affected their reproductive organs, or cancer, or the treatment for cancer or other diseases, endometriosis, cystic fibrosis. I could go on and on. There are a variety of causes, but the outcome is almost universal, personal devastation. Yet, when technology is available to assist one, the ultimate outcome of the disease can be quite miraculous, and opportunity is released. The longer you wait to have children, the less likely you will be able to have your own children who are genetically related to you without help. Make sure that you receive annual physical exams, including pelvic exams, and that you get tested for for those conditions that are treatable, so that you don't end up 5 years down the road with consequences that could have been avoided. If you find yourself at around 30 years old, without having started your family, consider fertility preservation. Consider storing your eggs. The age of the egg is the age of the mother unless the egg is frozen. So most of you are, what, 21, 22 years old? Your eggs are 21, 22 years old. If you freeze them, they stop aging. If you don't, they continue to age with you. So when you decide at 35 or 36 that you're ready to build your family, those 35 or 36-year-old eggs do the same thing. They act the same way that the eggs that have sat in your refrigerator for 3 or 4 months act. They're not as good quality. There are a myriad of options available to families in 2012 to help with family building, including adoption, foster care, IVF, using your own eggs, IVF using donor eggs, donor sperm, sperm from a couple, so on and so forth. So while you never have complete control over how and when your family is built and run, you have a lot of information and a lot of great choices. Now on to my discussion. It has often been said that the only constant in life is change. How true that is. Ideas that our forefathers and foremothers never dared to dream, which were inconceivable at one point because they seemed so far out of reach, are commonplace, routine, well accepted, and normal. I never expected to be involved in any paradigm change or to be at the center of the international media's glare. But my journey toward parenthood landed my entire family in that position. And your journey toward fulfilling your dreams may land you in the same place. When I was 18 years old, the weekend of my freshman orientation to University of Richmond, in fact, I was rushed to the hospital with severe cramping and bleeding. Following an emergency surgery, where I learned that I had endometriosis, I was told that I may have trouble getting pregnant and having children. I was young, unmarried, and disappointed, but didn't really appreciate the magnitude of that diagnosis at that time. But doing my due diligence over the next 6 years, I had a series of surgeries and went through a series of medical treatments that were intended to help me preserve my fertility and my ability to bear children when I got ready. And like most young people, I just figured everything would work out when I was ready, because that's what happens, right? I stand to you, almost 37 years old today, having invested tens of thousands of dollars in fertility treatment, hopes and prayers, and have never conceived. Yet, I am proud to share that I am the mother of beautiful, healthy, 7-year-old triplets who are here because of faith, hope, love, and family perseverance. My babies did not arrive the way that I thought they would, but they are here, and I am basking in the miracle of motherhood. And so grateful for them and for my mother, who served as my gestational carrier and delivered them at 55 years old. And for any of you that don't know her, my mother is on this front row. My husband and I started the K Foundation, named after her, in 2005 to encourage other families with infertility and to remind everyone that no matter how hopeless things look, if they don't give up and they maintain their faith, everyone who desires to love and raise a child should have that opportunity. As far as my background goes, I met the love of my life during the first week of medical school. 3 years later, we married, and soon thereafter began starting to try and get pregnant, to try and have a family. After 1 year of trying, unsuccessfully, we began the first of what would ultimately be 6 in vitro fertilization cycles. For those of you who have not had the opportunity to experience this, I'll share a little bit about what my first cycle felt like. draining experiences of my life. Once I identified a clinic that I would join the patient roster of, I became a member of a larger group of hopeful patients who were all being treated concurrently and synchronized medically in a manner designed to have us ovulate in unison. To accomplish this, each and the other fellow aspiring moms were placed on birth control pills for several weeks, 3 to 6 weeks. Each week, my anticipation grew in earnest, and I started to dream of becoming a mother and becoming pregnant, and what my baby would look like, and what I would look like. Following this birth control, we started the real medicine, as I thought of it at that point, the injectables. So I began to inject myself twice a day in my belly with medicine that was intended to help me produce more eggs. Every morning, I would travel to the clinic to have my body monitored to see how well my eggs were growing, and my anticipation grew. These visits had to be completed by 6:30, which meant they started at around 6, because I was a medical student working 90 hours plus in the hospital at that time, and I had to be to the hospital by 7. So once this regimen was complete, my husband and I would report to the outpatient surgery center to have my eggs removed, and he would give us a sample of, To remove my eggs, the doctors would stick a long needle through the wall of my vagina into each ovary and then aspirate the eggs. Once that surgery was complete, I would be informed about the number and quality of each egg, and the sperm would be mixed, and then every 24 hours we would be updated on the quality of the embryo, whether or not they had survived, how many cells they had divided into, and the nurses would call each day at the same time. As the time drew near for this daily report, I was always filled with a sense of excitement, eager to know how the embryos, which I thought of at that point as my babies, were doing. Yet I also dreaded the phone call because I feared that there would be fewer than the day before, and fewer embryos meant less chance of pregnancy. And as luck would have it, every day there were fewer embryos. I never had more than 3 embryos at the end of when it came to transferring them. So during the transfer procedure, the embryos were placed back into my womb, and the doctor always congratulated me on the table as being pregnant. And then 2 weeks later, we would get the results whether or not I was actually pregnant. My first round of IVF was my most hopeful. I even went into maternity stores and looked at clothing I thought that I might need at some point. Needless to say, my disappointment was always palpable when days later the negative test results were shared. Yet I still remained hopeful. I knew that most people didn't get pregnant with IVF the first time, and I don't know if I mentioned, but IVF is $15,000 per cycle. During the same period, again, I was working 90 hours, and many times the personal stress associated with failure to build my family, coupled with my work-related stress of being a medical student and working a lot, and also being newly married, I felt like at that point, seemed very overwhelming. I wanted to excel personally and professionally, and perceived my failure to get pregnant as a personal failure, rather than a medical condition beyond my control. Round 2 was a failure. Round 3 was not successful. Round 4 ended in defeat. Round 5 was a failure. Following each IVF failure, when I received the negative pregnancy test results, I was devastated and cried for hours. Each time I became less hopeful that I would ever conceive, and angrier